In it.
Hey, Mike.
Dang it, I forgot to text you.
Oh, that's okay. I'm checking in on all of them, and you're the last one, so they're all good.
Okay, yep.
Yeah. Okay. No presenters yet, though.
No, I was going to say, are there people in other ones?
Yeah.
Oh,
Most
okay.
of them.
I should have 3 art gallery.
Mm-hmm. Let's see.
So mine is a round table, or
Yeah, yours is. So it's basically a paper presentation. They're just talking about their art.
okay. Do you see my note in Slack? That
Yeah.
password? Okay.
The only other moderators that are going to be using that are on the board. I messaged all of them about it.
Yeah.
So. Well, this is odd.
No, I'm glad you're here because I'm like, did I do something wrong here, or I don't know. It's maybe they're just gonna log in right on time.
I'm going to jump out and check back on another one because
No problem.
there was only one moderator, I think, in session 1. So
no problem.
Yeah, I'll check back in a few minutes.
Okay.
See ya.
Hello, we're just gonna wait a few more minutes. We're missing one presenter and see if some other people join us. Okay.
Thank you. Good morning.
Hey, Chris, I'm just waiting for one more presenter. I was going to try to actually look up her email and send her. I don't know if she's having a problem getting in or not.
Hey, Mike. Tell you what, why don't you, I'll find her email. Why don't you go ahead and get started?
Okay.
And then, yeah, we'll see if she responds.
Okay. All right.
Good luck, everybody.
All right. Thank you guys for coming. I'm Mike Tasto, treasurer for the NRHC. Are you guys ready for some presentations today? All right. How do you pronounce it? Is it Maeve or Maeve?
Maeve.
Maeve. Okay. All right. Maeve, you're up first. We've got plenty of time. So I was going to have it like 15 minutes and then 5 minutes for questions, but you got the floor. We'll have plenty of time. So let's see what you got.
Perfect. Is it okay if I share my screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have that ability or do I have to see if you can do it or all?
I believe that I can. Just give me 1 second. All right. Everyone can see the picture?
Yep.
Awesome. So my name is Maeve Conlon. I attend St. Francis College down in Brooklyn Heights in New York City. And my photograph for this conference is a picture that I took walking along Court Street in downtown Brooklyn area. And I came across the Cobble Hill Cinema Marquee. And this was during the height of the pandemic, which I don't know if anyone's ever, had the opportunity to come down to New York City or visit Court Street. It is one of the most busy streets that we have in the downtown Brooklyn area. Like, it is never that clear on the streets. So it was really shocking to me to see how just empty the area was. And as I was walking around, and trying to just adjust as we all were during the pandemic, especially the height of it, I came across this marquee and I saw what it was saying to us. First, it said, "We love you, Brooklyn." It was such an important thing. The theme of this conference is answering the unanswerable questions. And so often I felt isolated. I know many other individuals felt isolated. In one of the busiest cities in the world, we all had to stay home. We were all quiet. So just getting that reminder that there are other people out there who are thinking of us and who love us was really inspiring to me as a Brooklynite. Uh, Following that, we see you soon, stay strong, and stay healthy. So we have a thing. One of my school mottos is Brooklyn Tough, and seeing this sign and seeing how we were reminded to stay strong and that we will get through this together, it really inspired me because there's so much time during that pandemic when you just felt isolated. You felt alone. You couldn't go out to see your neighbors or your friends or go to school. And just having this important reminder where a lot of people might just look by, just pass it on the street, not even think twice about it. I really stood here and reflected, seeing that this is the message that we need to hear. First and foremost, that we are loved, that we will stay strong. We've gone through bad times and we will continue to go through them. And then just the reminder of staying healthy. I'm sure we've all seen 10,000 signs about wearing masks and social distancing and stuff, but just that reminder of stay healthy, help protect your mind, protect your body, protect your soul. So it was a very inspirational sign. And one thing I would like to point out is beautiful greenery. So it is a very industrial area down there, lots of buildings, apartments, new things, and we still have that beautiful green of spring coming through to remind us that good things are coming. So yeah.
Maybe one of the things I noticed on the writing on the billboard is there's many different types of like O's. Zero, like if you look at all the O's, some of them are different, right? You got like kind of like a half an I, and sometimes they're using like a zero as an O, right? The Y's are somewhat different. It's kind of just picking up on the differences there. It's kind of neat, but it's a beautiful picture.
Thank you. Thank you. I kind of like to see how obviously this sign is longer than most of the other signs that they have created for the movie titles, but it was just such a wonderful little piece, like, hey, we love you, Brooklyn. Like just a little gentle reminder that this, not only this business, but other Brooklynites are thinking about them in the same way. So
What did you take the photograph with?
I have a Canon camera. It is a DSLR.
Mhm.
I'm not great with the exact model types, but I'm a big fan of photography. And for a very long time, I was just using my phone, but recently I was able to purchase the camera. And I was just kind of taking a walk down, by my school and just taking a walk along Court Street and stumbled upon this beautiful site. Like sometimes things just come up to you like, wow, this is a really nice image and I want to keep this. So
Mhm. Okay, nice, very nice. Thank you.
Can I ask, when you took it, was there, I don't know, were you just taking a bunch of pictures as you walked along, or were you like looking to, I don't know, were you looking to like create something for maybe future presentation?
I was just walking along, to be honest with you. I had to go to my college to pick something up, and I just kind of figured, let me get outside for a few minutes and just take a walk down the street. And it just so happened that I had my camera on me. Like, I wasn't even really planning to take any pictures this day. And I just stumbled upon this site and I saw it, and it inspired me so much, so I just snapped a quick photo of it. And I didn't even really think of like having a presentation, even thinking about this to present, until I read the conference theme, and I was like, this really connected with the image that I just took, and I had to like scroll through all my stuff to find it. And it was just such an inspiring question. How do you answer the unanswerable? And my suggestion is to just kind of look at little reminders like this. And one of the most unanswerable and unprecedented times that we were in, just having those little gentle reminders that you see just passing on a busy street can really help you answer some of those questions and definitely remind you of you're not alone in this.
Great, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll stop sharing my screen now. Is that okay?
All right. Yep. Thank you. Sarah, is it Saray or how do you pronounce it?
It's okay. It's Saray.
Sorry. Okay. You've got the floor.
Okay, I'll be sharing a slideshow that I have. Let me see. I think this should be. Are you able to see this?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'll start presenting. So I have a little slideshow here, and I'll be talking about my it's a project called The Never Ending Project, dealing with grief and loss in the visual arts. This is something that I had already been working on in the past few years, kind of just taking photos with this project in mind. But I thought it really did fit the conference theme in that there's no single way or best way to deal with grief. And so I wanted to have this presentation and this project to kind of show how I've dealt with loss using photography. So I do want to say that this project is a culmination of these photographs that I've taken the past 3 to 4 years, which is when I first decided to document my home life, and in particular, just like my family, our interactions, and my interactions with my father in particular. In the first few years before my father's death, my work consisted of environmental portraits, which I considered some sort of documentary photography, which in that time I used photography as a way to be vulnerable and to connect with my family in a way that I felt I couldn't before. So this here is one of the first photographs that I took in the series. Although I've been taking photos for the past 3 or 4 years, the images that I'll be showing you today are photos that I've taken after my father passed away. And so this is the first photograph that I took in the series that really inspired the project, which will hopefully be about 30 images put together in some sort of book format, whether online or physically a book. So this is an example of my past work where I work in both film and digital. So the first image you saw before was digital, and this is film where I used a large format view camera, and I worked in black and white. So this is kind of also some sort of context to the work that I do now, where I use images within images in kind of like their natural setting. Another example of this is my father using a 4x5 view camera. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about my influences. There are 2 photographers in particular, actually 3, that I found have really influenced me. One being Sally Mann, and this is one of her photographs of her son. And I think what I find striking about her work is just how she talks about, or at least illustrates, her relationship with her children. And it's, I feel like there's always this great interaction between the subject and the environment. She lives in Virginia, in kind of a more rural area. So it's nice to see kind of this combination of landscape and, you know, portraits, environmental portraits that I really enjoy. So, sorry. I've shifted somewhat from these environmental portraits that I've shown you a few slides back, and I'm focusing kind of on still lives and landscapes. So in the next couple of slides, I'll focus on describing my methods and my approach towards both types of these photographs. And so I'll start with still lives. I created still lives within the first few months of my father's passing. So I guess that's what I felt most connected to in the beginning, where I just took objects that were relevant to his life and to his illness. He had dementia and Alzheimer's, so he was an older man. And so in that process of the progression of his illness, he had, you know, a lot of hospitalizations, being in rehabilitation centers for, you know, the elderly. And so I guess I felt that a way to connect was to use these objects and have them interact with the outside. And so part of these still lives helped me really address these immediate questions of how do we interact with objects and photographs following the passing of a loved one. I have some photographs here of some items that I had packed into a tote bag the day that he passed away. And so these objects didn't necessarily hold any particular meaning before his passing. They're, you know, the other objects in the tote bag were disposable masks, diapers, things that were rendered kind of useless after he passed away, but suddenly became very sentimental. And I should also mention that I felt connection to these sort of disposable objects because my father didn't really have a lot of sentimental items that he kept around. So really my only connection to him were these objects and photographs that I had of him. So these are still lives, but using 4x6 prints that are very common that, you know, if you used to print and film back in the day, you just get a set of 4x6 prints, you know, with your negatives. And it's still something that I use today with my work. So another question that I faced following my father's death was the question of identity. You know, once that I was no longer a caregiver, I also had become a parent myself towards the end of his life. So in some ways, I think that I use these 4x6 prints as a way to partially fill the absence of my father. And I was also faced with images of myself as a child where, you know, I was still kind of innocent in a way, or I hadn't become a parent. And so, you know, it's almost reminiscing, but kind of in a slightly tragic way. And so this is a photograph of me and my father here. And again, it's like, I'm almost trying to approach this as an environmental portrait instead of a physical person standing there. I have this print in place, but I do want it to interact with its surroundings. I just really loved the way like the footprints there were so delicate. Like, you know, I think it snowed a few months ago when we had a lot of snow here in New York. So here's another photograph of me kind of interacting with the outside. You know, something else I like to emphasize is that these prints in particular that obviously were not taken by me, they were taken by my mother, most likely. They're originals. There's only one that exists of this print. So I think I'd like to say that I just didn't treat them as sacred. You know, someone asked me if these still lives are almost shrines, but I think it's the opposite of that, where I'm trying to take these photographs out of the context of an album, right, of a photo album, and taking them outside where they just weren't as sacred. I think that's just kind of the reality of life. We can't protect every moment. Sorry about I have a cat here, new cat, so he's a little hyperactive. So I did mention taking my photos out of that context of the photo album. And so, especially with seeing these photos where I interact with my father, I have to deal with kind of the understanding the impact of my father's parenting and his involvement in my life. And I think that was a big thing that I faced, you know, with the passing of a parent, and I'm not sure maybe other people also do. So I'll move on to landscapes. I think that landscapes offered a different type of reflection in the face of my loss. This is what I've been focusing on most recently. These are landscapes taken in my backyard, a space that was important to us, especially with the pandemic. My dad was very vulnerable in terms of his health, so we couldn't really go anywhere. And he passed away in June 2020. So the backyard was an important place to us. I've always been interested in the role of like using landscape to show personal history, and another photographer that I really enjoyed her work is, her name is AnnaMaria, and her work is these very pulled back landscapes using a view camera, 5x7 view camera, where she's, you know, generally just dealing with the impact and consequences of war in her own experience of fleeing Vietnam in 1975 with her family in the face of the Vietnam War. So one of my questions at the moment that I hope to address in this type of photograph in the landscape is, how can I show the effects of my existence on this small piece of nature, right? How can I even show the impact of my father's existence on this small area, despite the fact that he's gone? And is that apparent, you know? Can I see that? You know, I've realized that landscapes offer me some sort of meditative space, both in the process of taking images, where I feel that I have to be very observant of my surroundings, just very aware of very small details, because, you know, you'd think there's only so many photos I can take of the same space. But I've been, you know, taking photos here since I've moved into the space here for the past 4 years. So this is another landscape that I found really significant in my work, that I felt was like really what I was trying to achieve. This pile of sticks in the corner of our yard, where I hadn't realized this until another student in one of my classes had kind of spoken about it, that in some sense it feels very unnatural. And I realized that my father did play a hand in this photograph, not only in kind of the subject matter in that I'm dealing with his loss, but that these sticks are there, these branches are there because of a decision he made, you know, however many months ago, almost a year ago now. So I hope that these landscapes are kind of a more open-ended type of image for viewers, right? For people to kind of insert themselves into this work, especially if they haven't faced that sort of significant loss or death. So in that sense, although this project was created in response to the loss of my father, my intention is that it creates a space for anyone, you know, that has experienced any type of loss, which is, you know, I use a broader definition of loss, where it could be loss of a friendship or a relationship. You know, even moving is some sort of loss. And so I'd like to emphasize once again that there's no one way to grieve. So I hope that this could give you some insight into how I've used photography to do so. So here we are back at the first image. Thank you.
Nice job. Thank you. Well, this is probably a really easy answer for you, but what does still life mean? Like, I don't know what that means.
Of course. A still life is just taking photos of an object that you've arranged in a certain way. So I guess this isn't necessarily a still life in the traditional sense, because usually you have a backdrop and you know, people would imagine like some flowers or fruits as a still life, I guess in the sense of when you draw or paint. But I've been calling these a still life because I've been choosing where to place these photographs within a scene. Although I don't necessarily choose I don't really mess with the background, with the sort of the nature part of the scene. But that is a great question, because sometimes we forget to clarify these things.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
One of the other observations I made was, you talked about how these pictures are like a snapshot in time, and there's only one of them, right? Well, now by taking a digital picture of these, you've extended them into, much further.
Yeah, and that's really interesting that rather than scan them or something, a very practical way, I've chosen to kind of go through this whole process of saving them digitally.
Yeah, very nice. I think it's a really nice tribute to your father too.
Thank you.
Nice job. If anyone else has some questions or comments.
I have a quick question. So I just think it's really wonderful, this project that you have done in exploring this area of grief. I was just wondering, what inspired you to connect your father to the natural world? Was it something that you were more inclined to? Was it something that he was a very outdoors type of guy?
Yeah, I think he was an outdoorsy guy, right? I guess, he grew up in a rural area. He's Puerto Rican, and so he grew up in a rural area from over there. But I think something else was almost using the natural world as also like another way to replace a living person, where I in particular I feel that it's very difficult at this moment. It's still very recent to connect with other people, right? I've stopped doing portraits, but I found it easier to use the natural world and keep some sort of living aspect to my photographs. So.
I just had a quick, I guess it's more of an observation, but I don't find too many young people that are still shooting film. So I think that's pretty cool. I was curious how you got into film, and if you are developing it on your own, do you have your own little darkroom or what?
Yeah, I think film is actually, it's becoming a little bit more popular now. It's like the trendy thing to do, but I didn't consider myself a photographer at all until I started college. So I think it was my second semester of college that I took a photography class. And the first photography classes, like the intro ones, are all film, black and white film. So that's how I started, and I continued it. And I realized that I really enjoyed, large format, using a view camera. I'm very focused on digital, but that was very recently, in the past, I think since summer, that I started using a digital camera. But I used to be able to get it developed, but now because of the pandemic, obviously we're not on campus, so I don't have access to that. I mail out film and get it developed. There's also the process of scanning, and I've invested in a scanner to scan these negatives. So.
All right, well, thank you very much. AnnaMaria, welcome. I'm glad you made it. You have the floor.
Okay, sorry about that. I had Wi-Fi issues this
That's
morning.
okay.
So I'm going to be presenting on my piece called How Many More? Are you guys able to see my screen? Okay. So again, my piece is titled How Many More? My name is AnnaMaria Leal. I'm a student at St. Francis College and a first-year senior in their psychology BA/MA program and a double minor in Spanish, Women and Gender Studies. But on the side from my academics, I actually like to practice photography. I'm the co-president of the photography club because I want to find some way to bring my creativity to the school and find some way to use it. So this was something I do in my free time, as I photograph things. So I created this piece with some images I had worked on about 2 years ago. And when the prompt came and I was trying to find that answer to the impossible question of how many more people have to lose their lives to gun violence, I found that as I was going through my photos, there wasn't just one photo that I thought could answer that or relay the message that I wanted to give. So I actually took two sets of photos from two different situations, and the background specifically came from another piece that I was working on a larger scale, which was going to be a video combining these sets of images. But I want to focus specifically on gun violence as a whole, and then narrowing in on the topic of mass shootings. So something that I appreciate from, I'm very fortunate that I've never been the survivor of gun violence or experienced anyone who I know is a victim of gun violence, but it's been, I think, for many students in our generation, a very close to home topic, because we were there when Sandy Hook occurred. We were there when Parkland occurred. We've heard of the other ones that have occurred, and more recently, I just thought about this morning. We've had the mass shootings in the last couple of weeks. So I didn't even realize how relevant this piece keeps being. As I look into it more, I realize how it's never going to not be relevant in that sense. Like, there's always, unfortunately, something that happens. So when you look at this piece, the top row was originally created on a separate day from the bottom half of the photos. It was intended to be just a discussion piece. There's other photos that go along with those first three, but I didn't feel like they were relevant to this piece as a whole, but they were to be a piece to call awareness on National Gun Violence Advocacy Day or Awareness Day. And so it was a way of memorializing the victims of some of the mass shootings that have occurred in the last couple of years. This piece specifically I took it a few days after the Darwin shooting in Australia. So it was kind of a way for me to kind of cope with another mass shooting being highlighted in the news. So the first photo actually highlights the victims of Aurora, Colorado in 2012, where there was 12 victims. Then Aurora, Illinois, in 2019, where there were 7 victims. And then Darwin, Australia in 2019 as well, where there was 4 victims. And this was the only one that highlights an international mass shooting. All of the other ones in the collection are from the United States. And then the last photo shows Virginia Beach in 2019 with 13 victims, and Parkland 2018 with 17 victims. And all of these photos were going to be put into a video, and were kind of inspired by an artist by the name of Grandson, who has a song called Thoughts and Prayers, which calls to the fact that, our legislators and our politicians have to stop just saying like, oh, we're very sorry for your loss. Like, here's our thoughts and prayers. It's more, we need your action now. We need you to actually work to kind of create legislation that will do something and hopefully put an end to and find solutions to gun violence. So then the bottom photos are just scenes from a protest that occurred a week or two afterwards. I took the first photos, and it was kind of perfect timing because it wasn't something I intended to participate in. But when I got the information and I saw this was happening, I said, I've just finished this photo shoot like a week or two before, and now this is like, it's a sign that I have to be there and I have to go get these photos. So I captured photos of, people's signs, and try to like listen to the stories that were being told. Those on the bottom row, you can see a group of people standing in a line. Those are all the relatives of someone who has lost someone to gun violence. And they have a big banner on the floor that shows the faces of some of the victims that have lost their lives to gun violence as well. And you have parents who work with Moms Demand Action, and there was students from Students Demand Action. They're sharing their story and why, gun violence and finding solutions to it is so important to them. So I hoped that the photo, the inspiration for the title comes from the photo in the center where it says, hey, NRA, how many kids have you killed today? So I hoped that I kind of got the title from there of like, how many more people in general are we going to lose to this? Like, is it going to be my brother or my sister tomorrow, or my friends the next week at a club, whatever it might be? Like, how many people, how long do we have to wait, and how many people will make it enough that we stop this issue? So that was the inspiration for the title. And I hoped that whoever looked at it would kind of try to ask themselves that question as well, of like, what's the breaking point? What makes people realize that enough is enough and we have to do more than what we're doing? Because I think we all are aware of it. And most issues that occur today, it's in the news for a couple of days or a couple of weeks, and then it fizzles out. And the only people left screaming and left talking about it are the ones who were directly affected by it. So I hoped that this would kind of ask the person who's viewing the photo, like, when do we say enough? Like, we've been saying enough, but what's the next, like, what's that checkpoint where we actually do something more? So then, just to kind of give like a background to gun violence, there's different forms of gun violence. And these are definitely not all of them, but it's definitely a good view at some of the ones that we can discuss. So one of the ones is suicide. So those who complete suicide, And I use the term complete instead of committed because suicide is not, it shouldn't be labeled as a crime. It's a mental health issue. But those who complete suicide, there's an increased chance if there's a gun in the household, there's an increased chance. There's a lot of people who use guns to complete suicide in terms of other methods. So it is an impact, it is affected by gun violence. It is a form of gun violence. We have mass shootings, which we are most commonly familiar with in terms of the discussion of gun violence. We also have intimate partner violence. So if there is a gun in the household or an owner of the gun within a relationship, there are chances where it can be used as like a threat to the survivor in that situation. So it is impact and an effect of gun violence. So you also have community violence, which can be robberies, gang violence, assault. So anything that can occur in kind of your neighborhood. Something that we don't discuss enough is that police brutality also falls into the topic of gun violence because it unfortunately wrongfully takes the lives of people like Breonna Taylor, who were in their house innocently and were the victim of gun violence. And then you have accidental deaths. So if this can be with children, so if there's guns in the household, there's an increased likelihood that someone will be hurt by them. So especially children, even if something's properly stored in lock, children will get into anything. And so it's very dangerous to have that. It increases like the chances of someone getting hurt, or even if people think they know how to properly use something, not all the time does everything work the way we want it to. So someone could just be touching it and it can go off, and that can be a big issue too. So there's important data to look into when we talk about gun violence and gun control as a whole. So Amnesty International has shown that there's more than 360 people in the United States are shot every day and survive, and that's survive at least long enough to get to the hospital. So we don't know the data afterwards of how many people who have been shot and make it to the hospital die afterwards. That can contribute to our numbers of deaths. But it's crazy to hear that 360 people every single day are shot. That just feels like too much to me. And then we have the Gun Violence Archive, which works to collect data on mass shootings across the United States and across the world to kind of keep track of what's occurring in our society. So at the end of 2019, there was 417 mass shootings in the United States. Again, we don't hear about all of these, and that might seem shocking to some people to hear that there was 417, because maybe we heard about, a handful in the news, but not everything gets broadcasted in the news. And I think that's where people don't realize how prevalent of an issue this is. And then finally, the National Center for Health Research shows that legislation like the Brady Bill, which it was established, I believe, in 1994, and then it creates background checks. So you have to go through a specific process in order to purchase a gun. But because of legislation like the Brady Bill, it has helped stop 2.1 million gun purchases between 1994 and 2014, which as a whole, because of this, it has helped prevent 1 million felons, 291,000 domestic abusers, and 118,000 fugitives from purchasing firearms. So it's been able to stop people who shouldn't have guns in their hands or who are a risk to the rest of our lives from purchasing them, and preventing probably more unnecessary mass shootings. So some solutions to gun violence, so some potential solutions. And I think it's important to highlight here that gun violence is a health crisis. It's not just, an issue in our world. It falls into being a health crisis because it impacts the lives of others. But one potential way is ending the stigma around mental health. So when we talk about suicide or mass shootings, a lot of times mental health gets brought up, and it's considered as one of the factors of why someone might, cause a mass shooting. And sometimes it's used as the scapegoat in situations like Parkland. There was enough information ahead of time to know that the student was a risk to other students at his school, but no one did anything. So we have to work on ending the stigma, because, maybe someone who's at risk for suicide could, seek help, and then that would be one less casualty. Or maybe if someone saw that a student was hurting and was being bullied by others or was being isolated, and maybe they don't seem like they're okay, they can get help early enough. And that also factors into a lot of other health issues. So, like making sure people have the insurance or the ability to pay for mental health care. So everything kind of falls into one another in this conversation. Everything gets impacted by gun violence. We also have better access to education is another potential solution, because if people in lower income neighborhoods have the ability to go to school and have after school programs or anything like that, they have a more likelihood to, increase on the social ladder and also bring their families with them and get out of neighborhoods that might be risk factors to their lives and to others, and maybe wouldn't keep them from being encouraged to join groups that will lead to, getting involved with guns and getting involved with the wrong group of people. So it's really important that like education and allowing students to get an education, go to college, go to high school, go to whatever, and participate in activities after school and just be active students. That's really important as well. Something I learned more recently, and I've been like obsessed with learning more about, is that actually cleaning up your local community is one of many solutions that can help put an end to gun violence. So we all probably know like some space in our neighborhoods where there's an empty lot that maybe has cars or an abandoned building, anything like that. Those can be potential storages for illegal weapons, anything like guns or anything like that. And so by just cleaning up, an empty lot and making it a green space, or they call it greenifying or beautifying those spaces, it increases the people who want to stay in those communities. Same thing goes with houses. If you just take a rundown house and you kind of put a fresh coat of paint and fix, broken boards, and instead of boarding up windows, just make it look appealing to the neighborhood, people are more likely to stay in their communities and spend times in these green spaces, which limits the amount of people who will use it to store illegal weapons. So it's something that seems very simple, and I would have never thought it was a solution to gun violence, but it's actually a really great way to decrease the impact of gun violence in a community. And then finally, as we're probably all familiar with, just stricter gun laws. So this is increasing the number of hours of training someone has to go through in order to buy a gun, and making sure that they actually have to do training, because there are some states where you don't have to do any sort of training once you buy a gun. It's also making sure that you make background checks and mental health checks to make sure that whoever is getting the gun is actually someone who is using it for the right intents and purposes and is not going to be a risk factor to their community or anyone else, or even themselves. So these are just a few potential solutions, but I think they're all really important in their own respect. And finally, some ways that you can get involved is if you are busy, short on time, donating is always a good option. So you have organizations like Every Town for Gun Violence, which works to prevent gun violence by raising awareness and promoting gun control legislation. You also have the Brady campaign, which looks to reduce gun deaths in half by 2025. The Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, which utilizes policy development and advocacy to prevent gun violence. Giffords Law, which was founded by the former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, who is a survivor of gun violence. And you also have Columbia Surge, which stands for the Scientific Union for the Reduction of Gun Violence. And they approach the topic of gun violence from a scientific standpoint. So they are hoping that it will be treated as a top research priority for both like science as a whole and scientists. And they work to encourage research into gun violence and solutions for it. So they're one of the people who has found that creating green spaces in a neighborhood and cleaning up the environment in a neighborhood actually helps reduce gun violence. Then if you do have time and you are looking to have a more kind of active role in making a difference in terms of gun violence in our communities, you can always volunteer or participate in protests or anything like that by Every Town for Gun Violence has branches. So Moms Demand Action, Students Demand Action. So you can join the respective group. They have March for Our Lives, which is a youth coalition to help stop gun violence. And then they also advocate a lot for it. You have Women Against Gun Violence. Again, Columbia Surge is always looking for students to take on internships and fellowships in their research labs regarding gun violence. And then you have Amnesty International, which works on a global scale, but one of the topics that they focus on in the United States that you can get involved in is the reduction of gun violence in our country. And then finally, you have communication. So you can call out politicians who are funded by the NRA. So there are politicians who take money in from the NRA as lobbyists to help them push through bills that would keep guns and protect the Second Amendment. And so you can call out those politicians and make people aware of the fact that they're taking in this money from the NRA to advocate for specific things that the NRA would like to keep in place. You can also contact your elected officials to let them know how important gun safety is to you as a constituent. This is really important because if a lot of constituents of theirs come to them saying that gun violence is really important, they're more likely to bring it to the attention of the community and advocate as a whole, especially if they want to get reelected. And finally, you can raise awareness for the need of gun safety through social media. So by just sharing, there's a lot of resources online that you can share on your own personal accounts. And by doing so, you might help reach people who aren't aware that these are issues, or that the simple solutions such as just cleaning up a space in your neighborhood, or helping to destigmatize mental health. By doing this, you can really help reach a new generation or another group of people who maybe weren't aware of things that can be done and what's going on in terms of gun violence. So these are my references. And I have this in my email on the webpage. So if anyone's interested in further, you can always reach out to me. And if you have any questions, you can always contact me or ask them now if you're on this. And you can also reach out to me through LinkedIn. So thank you.
Thank you, AnnaMaria. Where are you? Oh, you're right in the middle. There you are. Just a couple of comments as you were presenting. I looked up the statistics for 2020 and 2019, and the number of deaths by gun violence was 20,000 last year and about 15,000 in 2019. And then dividing that on a daily basis, it's over 50 people a day dying. So I mean, just to imagine like a day like today, where 50 to 60 people will die by gun violence, which won't be reported in the press like a mass shooting would be. So I think it's just overlooked on how bad the situation is. And then of course, suicides are different. There's a lot that are completed by gun as well. One other point, so when you're talking about gun regulations, I just looked up the second amendment to the Constitution in the Bill of Rights. And I've talked about this before, but it says I never actually looked up the actual amendment. And so I'm going to read it to you. It says, a well-regulated militia, comma, be necessary to the security of a free state, comma, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, comma, shall not be infringed. And so when I always think about the Second Amendment to the Constitution, when was this done? This is in the 1700s, and that's when we needed to keep our militia, the Minutemen, so that we could rise up against our government. The guns that we have in our houses today, would that be equivalent to what our military is today? Do we have enough to fight against our government? I don't think so. So a lot has changed over time, but that amendment that we have in that right was for different reasons. So it's just an observation that things have changed over the last couple hundred years, and why we actually have that. But very nice job. I liked your research. You got a great message, and nice job on your slides. And I'll open it up to anyone else who has some questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. I was just interested in knowing if you were interested in pursuing kind of, the same sort of topics, or in general, if you're interested in like photography, like for social change, and if you see yourself doing or continuing this work.
So I think with my club, I always tell them I never have like a specific topic or genre of photography that I think I have been fully able to like immerse myself in, but every time I've gone to like a protest or anything like that, I think it was 2 years ago, I submitted a photo actually to the conference that was discussing like immigration, and I realized there's a lot of power through photography, and especially with your work, I thought it was really beautiful. Like it can tell a story, And so I haven't been able to go into anything with COVID. I have high-risk family members, but I usually try to, when I hear of protest or advocacy days and things like that in my community, I try to go and capture and tell the story as best as I can through photography, because that's like, to me, that's the only way I know how, is like, you know, to capture a student protesting gun violence and, you know, the message that they're trying to get across, or the family being separated by immigration and their kind of story together. So I think there's a lot of, you don't necessarily have to write something to have power through the image that you're showing, which is something like with this piece. When I was putting it together, I actually showed it to a few friends first, because I was like, I don't know if I'm like, does this tell the story that I want to tell? I was like, what do you see from this when you look at it? And thankfully, like, they were all able to like look at it and say to me, like, I can tell that you're trying to say, like, here are the victims at the top, and, you know, here are the people below who are impacted. And even if it's not directly, they know someone who knows someone who knows someone, or they see these faces at these congregations, like they see who's being affected by it. So I try to pursue photography on the side in order to tell stories, but it's not like my full like time path, but it is something that I hope I can continue to do even after like I graduate, even after I finish with my club, like just something I can keep doing to tell the stories as best as I can through something I love.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys. We have 25 minutes left. If you'd like to go in and join one of the other sessions, that'd be really nice to support the other research that's happening. So thank you for attending, and I hope you guys enjoy the day of the conference and make it to the student event later today. All right. Nice job. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.